In 2019, Free Duad was only 15 years of age when she partook in her most memorable grown-up mountaineering rivalry. It was the European Cup in Innsbruck where the young lady won the gold decoration, which she hadn't expected. Then she wound up one of the 5 best mountain dwellers at the Senior World Cup in Colorado, became turned into a lesser title holder in Italy, and won a bronze decoration at the Senior European titles. This is a long way from being the exhaustive rundown of her honors. Luke's future in mountaineering was extremely encouraging, and she was very renowned in her circles. The young lady was very dynamic on Instagram, where she distributed photographs of her preparation and achievements. Luce's way of climbing was dynamic and conclusive. One might in fact say that the young lady was a wonder in her circle, assuming that we utilize the French arrangement of extraordinary stone climbing courses by trouble levels in 2023, arrived at the Ace imprint at 8B, in addition to later on the young lady, might have turned into serious areas of strength for an in the Olympic Games since beginning with 2020. This sort of game was at last going to be added to the opposition program, yet at the time she was as yet a light-hearted young lady whose entire life was in front of her, and who needed to spend it in a tomfoolery and dynamic way. So on June 14th, she and her companions set out for the French Alps to have some good times and further develop their athletic abilities. The young lady chose to climb the open course close to the regions of Slither and Steedish. It was situated between regions that were trying for rock climbing free, knew the neighborhood sheikhs well overall, and had been there different times previously, so nothing appeared to present any danger until the young lady slipped and tumbled from a level of very nearly 52 m. She kicked the bucket on the spot from the supported wounds. The worldwide stone move in local area was stunned by this episode. No one could accept Free might have let anything turn out badly, since she was the most incredible in this dread. Then the French specialists got working on it. They found that the young lady probably introduced her rope onto the handrails during a troublesome entry. Actually, Free wasn't their most youthful peculiarity in the mountaineering local area. Another popular name in this game is Tito Traversa, and he's significantly more youthful than Free. In 2008, Tito came out on top for his most memorable championship at a climbing rivalry at Rock in Lao. He had the option to vanquish his most memorable troublesome course of the AA level when he was 9 years of age. At 10, he arrived at 8B, and on spring 29, in a real sense, a month prior to his 11th birthday celebration, Tito set another worldwide best of achieving 8B plus comparative. With her, this adoration for rock climbing was imparted in the kid by his dad, and in 2013, when Tito was 12 years of age, his father got him new fast draws for a rock climbing trip in France. Speedy draws comprise of 2 conjoined carabiners, one of which the climber joins to the stone and the other one is utilized to string the well-being rope through it. Was with these fast draws that Tito went on a training excursion to the rough area of Aura as a component of a gathering comprising of 10 children and 3 grown-ups to begin with. They all needed to overcome a 6B way as a warm-up prior to going to a really difficult spot. So for Tito it was an exceptionally simple undertaking at this point. Eventually, the kid tumbled off a 20 m tall stone. The fast draws were assumed to stop the fall. However, something turned out badly, and Tito passed on. Yet for what reason did this happen? Had the kid's dad purchased untested analyst gear for his own kid? No, as it worked out that time Tito was utilizing another person's speedy draws, yet the main pressing concern lay in the manner the stuff was introduced. One of the grown-up educators committed an error with 8 out of 10 fast draws. He strung the carabiners just through the elastic guardian, rather than the sewed-on slingat. The closures of the apparatuses intended to bear the climber's weight. That is the reason that court squeezed charges of compulsory homicide of a kid against 6 individuals, the proprietors of the elastic retainer, assembling organization, the mountaineering gear shop, the chief of the Getting Over Club, that coordinated the excursion, the two educators as well as a relative of the young lady, who'd loaned Tito her hardware. In the end, one of the teachers was condemned to 2 years in the slammer and needed to take care of the legitimate expenses, adding up to over €21,000, as this was the man's most memorable offense. In the end, he didn't have to carry out the punishment. Still, once in a while, even mature age and long stretches of involvement can't save the existences of the world's most popular climbers. So how do prestigious climbers who have proactively vanquished the most difficult ways set new standards? For instance, they made a CI side to go free performance getting over. It's a sort of getting over finished by one individual, with no security stuff or help from different mountain climbers at all. Obviously, this style is more risky than conventional getting over, so the people who try to take the plunge get more acknowledgement. For example, John Patron bears the name of the free climbing legend. When he was as yet a youngster, supporters began free soloing on 5.11 treble level courses, as per the US reviewing framework, back when 5.12 wasn't even on the framework yet. On the off chance that we summarize every one of his risings, we can express that in his profession that spanned 30 years, John scaled 457 km of rock without utilizing any ropes. However, what put him on the map was the new aspects move. In the Ed Public Park, John even offered $10,000 to whoever would rehash his free soloing accomplishments, yet nobody faced the challenge of event attempting. John independently fostered a free performance climbing preparing framework, which introduced another time of competitors. Yet his framework was doubtlessly not without its blemishes. In 2006, a critical occasion occurred in John's life. He and his colleague Steve had a fender bender. Steve kicked the bucket, and Jeff figured out how to get by in spite of his various wounds he was driving on that day. So he accused himself the main thing that set him straight was rock climbing. He chose to return to his number one movement, regardless of his neck wounds and poor mental express. The climber lived close to a terrific stone named Dyke Wall, not a long way from Mammoth Lakes, California, so he went there to take part in his one game and get his brain off things. As consistently, he chose to climb alone and without a security rope, so it's obscure the way that his last preparation went. However, soon Jeff was found in a horrendous state. In all likelihood, the climber was still too frail after the mishap and unfit to deal with a basic rising, which made him fall. Jeff lacked the ability to talk regularly to make sense of what precisely had happened to him. We'll never find out, since Jeff's life couldn't be saved. The undeniably popular stone climber passed on in the emergency clinic. Tragically, free performance climbing ended the existences of numerous different climbers on July 19, 2004. A distressed Fred, however, called the Save and Salvage episode leader Fred, was very stressed over his companion and regular climbing accomplice Dwight Cleric, who was consuming most of the day to get back from an independent rising in the fantastic Navigate. Fred real-eyed Dwight had set out for the stones back on July 16th and had wanted to make the course in one day. Dwight was an expert climber and had a name among mountain climbers since he'd vanquished staggeringly troublesome courses, like for instance Eiger Top in the Beres Alps. Yet Dwight coordinated the greater part of his getting over endeavors at the Teton Range in the northwest of the US. He made a couple of risings to the various pinnacles of this mountain range. A large number of those excursions were free soloing, and he got over some of them in the colder time of year, when the least complex course can become elusive and risky. It appeared as though nothing was over Dwight's head at this point. Something inside kept Fred tense, so he informed the salvage group. They observed that Dioceson's vehicle was currently toward the beginning of the course on the lying glades. This must be one thing. The climber was no doubt in a tough situation. On the extremely following day, an enormous gathering of officers began their pursuit mission. While dropping from a gorge called Gunsight Score, they experienced a gathering of mountain climbers who said they'd found somebody's knapsack in the vicinity and left it where it was. The officers tracked down it at an elevation of 187 m and 15 m over Dwight's dead body was found. Deciding by its position, the man had tumbled off a stone. And that is the most unnerving thing about free soloing, assuming that anything happens, there'll be no one there to catch and help you. Michael Reardon's folks understood their child would be a stone climber back when he's still a kid, got over the boulders in his granddad's patio. When Michael progressed in years, he found an enthusiasm for stumbles into the Rockies and the Appalachian Mountains at last. Michael chose to take on a course that scored 5.7 on the trouble scale, yet he had neither mountain dweller companions to go with him nor any stuff of his own, so raised and set out on the course alone with no security stuff or rope, and he prevailed. After that, Michael participated in many performance jumps on testing rock courses with no fake ascensions and preparing that most mountain climbers shared. He said he could scale around 5,000 m of vertical stone in one day, yet his desirous associates didn't really accept that Mike, saying that he was imagining everything and that there was not a great explanation to trust any clearly proclamations. Without adequate confirmation, after that Mike began taking games photographic artists with him on every one of his trips to make it unthinkable for anybody to uncertainty. His accomplishments Mike put the finish to the contention when he vanquished a well-known course called Heartfelt Fighter in the Needles, situated in the Sierra Public backwoods, California. The mountain climbers, who use ropes and security gear, normally went through a whole day increasing 244 m of the upward stone, however raised in. Outfitted with just his mountaineering shoes and a sack of chalk, completed them, rising in under 2 hours. And here's his smooth photograph report for the doubters. On July 13, 2007, Michael, joined by a photographic artist, set out looking for new achievements toward the southwestern shore of Ireland. They showed up on Valena Island, where Mike would free performance climb the stones close to the Atlantic Sea, yet out of nowhere, a haze dropped, so the perceivability declined, and the stones became wet and elusive. However, this didn't stop Mike. The photographs taken against them scenery of the thundering waves was stunning. The climber completed 2 risings and was looking out for a kelp-covered edge to have the option to get back to the photographic artist on the opposite side of the harbor and return home unexpectedly. A Goliath wave entered the harbor and hit Mike. He attempted to acquire some balance on the edge, yet the water deeply inspired him. In only seconds, the ebb and flow removed the man 150 m from the shore. Help showed up at the spot of the occurrence in under 15 minutes. However, at that point, Mike was no place to be seen. 12 worker salvage boats, a Coast Watch boat, and a helicopter furnished with an infrared scanner worked at the site until dull the next day. The naval force jumpers showed up. They looked through an enormous region of the sea. However, rearing was never found. The miserable incongruity was that Michael wasn't scaling a stone when the wave took him, yet on the off chance that he had been utilizing a rope and hadn't been detached from it while remaining on that edge, this misfortune might have been stayed away from. Still, there's a tale and up about a climber with an alternate approach to utilizing a rope during the rising, yet his framework didn't make the action more secure. A remarkable inverse. On October 26, the 1998 12-year-old Emma Osman considered her dad, the well-known rock climber Dan Osmay. All canvassed in tears, the young lady saw unnerving film of her dad plummeting rocks with practically no well-being stuff, or far more atrocious, falling into the void while attached to a rope. Immediately, Dan went from use to Gardnerville to quiet her down. However, he continued with his tricks. Dan had begun his vocation as a conventional mountain climber, yet in the long run got into solo trip very soon. However, he got exhausted with it as well. Then Dan became focused on rope, leaping off scaffolds or bluffs. Osman even did them for promotion recordings anyway. He didn't make much. For instance, Osman paid the specialist who dealt with his steady little wounds like cracked ribs and lower legs with the coats and shoes he got from the supporters. The man was even captured for his many blades, for example, for breaking traffic guidelines. He was so to talk a cool miscreant who got a kick out of the chance to face challenges in all things. So, when even rope hopping became exhausting for him, Dan concocted his own perplexing rope establishment frameworks. They dispersed the heap during a leap such that empowered the jumper to tumble from such extraordinary levels that no one at any point considered bouncing from utilizing the customary mountaineering ropes. Besides, dissimilar to bungee hopping in Dan's framework, when the jumpers fell, the rope halted them extremely near the ground. This style was called body flinging, or controlled quickly dropping. Osman began fostering this procedure and pushing different climbers to attempt the new movement. He generally pre-extended new ropes with a progression of deficiencies to decide their greatest length. Yet, in 1994, a mountain climber named Bobby Tarver, who was evaluating Dan's recent fad, extended a formerly unused rope so much that it crushed into the gulch wall, killing him on the spot. The court tracked down not a really obvious explanation to fault Osman for Bobby's demise. This in inent should basically make him a smidgen more vigilant. However, that didn't occur. Osman had all the earmarks of being moved by these leaps. Still, on the day when he was mitigating his crying girl, he had at passing considered what might occur if he somehow happened to bite the dust. When Dan returned to California, park officers arrested him for his non-installment of fines. Dan's companions accumulated the bail cash for himself, as well as his movie chief companion, Eric Perlman, even vowed to vow his own home to get Dan to guarantee he'd fix the his life was in. Yet it wasn't excessively some time before new difficulty. The officers took Dan destroy a leap pinnacle he'd worked in Yosemite under the danger of seizure. Dan climbed the stone, yet rather than satisfying the request, Osman chosen to play out a 282 leap involving the ropes that had been hanging in the downpour and snow for north of a month. Such ropes are utilized on Mount Everest. Certo, the man was certain he'd be okay under such sticky, chilly circumstances, and the leap went flawlessly the next night. Dan overlooked destroying the pinnacle and was wanting to do a record-breaking hop, during which he'd wind up significantly nearer to the ground. Yet this time Osman bounced at a point he hadn't attempted before. Dan's companions were on the highest point of the stone at that point, and they saw his spotlight evaporate into the obscurity 10 seconds after the fact. The rope fixed, and a shout arrived at their ears from beneath. At first, they thought Dan had gotten found out on a branch and hurt himself in the wake of plummeting. His companion saw the torn finish of the rope balancing down from the branches. Then he saw Osman calmly lying on his side. The companion checked his heartbeat and observed that Dan's heart was done pulsating right up to the present day. Many individuals see Osman as the world's best stone climber who sought after his objective. Furthermore, was brave even notwithstanding demise. However, this believed is a long way from being shared by everybody. Some think Dan was just a trick lover who drove his stunts to careless limits, disregarding the potential results.